And we're recording. Perfect.
Awesome.
All right. First off, thank you very much for being here. I know you're off right now. You could be doing anything, and you're here in a bodybuilding posing room talking about. Well, let's start off with who you are.
Okay.
Who are you?
Well, my name is Anthony Long. Most importantly, I would say I'm a Christian, devout member of my Catholic Church in the Knight of Columbus. My community knows me better as a firefighter and a EMT/paramedic student right now. So my brothers know me as a veteran from prior life in service. I was both in the Navy and Marine Corps side of things, and then went all the way back, just a kid here in Soldotna, Alaska. So kind of depends on what stage of life, but who you're talking to.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So, what are some of the things that you do? So, you mentioned Knights of Columbus and being Christian. How did you get involved in Knights of Columbus?
Originally, I became baptized when I was in high school as a Catholic. I grew up through a couple different Christian denominations. Kind of looked through. Went to Lutheran school for a while. With some of my buddies, other Christian churches in town, just kind of figuring out where I belonged. Found myself in a Catholic church after doing quite a bit of reading, and decided I wanted to be baptized in that denomination. Maintained the faith off and on throughout my early life there into the military. And in my last year, actually in the Navy, became even more devout. So upon returning home, I was like, hey, how can I be part of the church and how can I help the church instead of just being a member? And a lot of the guys in our community were very openly saying, hey, we would love to have some younger blood in our Knights of Columbus. Right now it's almost all a bunch of old geezers. Somebody under the age of 45 would be kind of nice. And so I said, sign me up. I'll be there at the meetings, especially, it's only one meeting per month, so it's really easy to keep within the schedule. And then the volunteer events that we do are kind of based off of what you're able to do. So if it matches with my schedule, I hop in and get the job done. Otherwise, they understand and we go from there.
So, explain the Knights of Columbus a little bit because watching gangster flicks, always thought for some reason it was associated with mob. I didn't really associate it with the Catholic Church.
Okay. So the Knights of Columbus originally started in 1882 with a priest named Father McGivney. He was over in Connecticut in the United States, and he recognized a very severe need in his community, specifically for more outreach of how to help the community. There are like families that obviously had lost houses either from fires or medical events, and it was how can we pull the church together and support them financially and just socially as well. And so he organized the young men that were at that parish to get together, and they formed the first Knights of Columbus. From there, it took off like a wildfire across the United States. It's mostly a U.S. Um, organization within the Catholic Church for young men, young going all the way to 105 years old. And yeah, and ideally, every parish would have its own council for the Knights of Columbus. Some are too small or just not necessarily organized enough to do it. But there's an overhead across the United States of a kind of like I would say a greater council is the best way to put it. It's just some of the guys I've been invested in a long time. They find a way to help out, keep everything organized and structured in a mannerly way, so we can pull our resources together as one big group instead of each parish only being able to do what they can do individually.
So, when and where do you do it?
Okay, so for myself, I'm a member of Our Lady of Perpetual Help, which is a church here in Soldotna, Alaska, and then we're partnered up actually with Our Lady of the Angels in Kenai. So the two parishes, both because we have the same priest, and also because most of the members are kind of back and forth between the two, agreed that it should be one singular Knights of Columbus, which has worked out very well because now we have one of the largest in the state actually with the number of members that show up. Quite a blessing to have two different parishes there. We show up at O'Neill Hall, which is the western wing of our parish in Soldotna. It's every Tuesday at 6:30 we get together. 6:30 at evening. I'm not a morning person by any means. So 6:30 we get together for a rosary. We do rosary from 6:30 to 7. The meeting conducts from 7 to 8, normally, give or take a couple minutes. And then we stay after until about 9, eating food and beverages and just kind of getting to know each other a little bit better. Okay. That's the first Tuesday of every month.
And that is, where is that at? that Our Lady of Perpetual
It
Help?
is Our Lady of Perpetual Hope.
So let's kind of, if you don't mind, kind of getting into the meat.
Okay.
Um, during your time in the military, were you active in the church? Because when I was on active duty, it seemed to me like the only time that I was pulled towards the church was when there was um, some sort of what I thought was an existential crisis. Right? And it's kind of, um, I think in the last case, and personally in the case of my divorce and a lot of the things that I went through in that, certainly pushed me back into this kind of spiritual Ronin, right? Like I'm looking for faith in different places, and I'm trying different churches and different ideas. And um, I know that for me, a lot of it came from things that were being said or things that were being done or the way I was being treated by people. And there was a quote that I heard from a rapper by the name of LP and just kind of stuck with me. Nobody struts when they're down on their knees.
Very, very true.
And so that's kind of how we met. Was like we see each other at the gym, but then it was on my path. Like I was raised Catholic, baptized. I never did confirmation because even then it just something felt a little off for me. Maybe it was where I was. Maybe it was where I was in life at 15. I don't think I was ready. I don't think I was ready to marry Christianity. Like at 15 is a really tough time to commit to anything for the rest of your life. Um, that said, what were some of the things that like were you active in church and military, and if not, what kind of led you back to this path?
Okay. I would say it waxed and waned for sure. Starting off at 18, I was a very proud Catholic going into the boot camp, for instance, which Great Lakes, Illinois, outside of Chicago, was Navy boot camp. Um, and you have to fill out your forms when you show up. You know, you have a denomination for your dog tags. Of course, I put Roman Catholic on mine, so I wore those proudly every time. I had to put them on every day, and I think a lot of my guys knew around me that it was very clear I was Christian, which like most of them, if not at least half of them, I'll put it that way. Um, we got through boot camp, and then my core school training was in San Antonio, Texas. Made a couple really good friends in my class, so we actually went to church pretty regularly on Sundays, which was a little interesting because to leave base for the first phase, you had to be in uniform still. So we'd show up as a little group in uniform, just look silly as all can be. But we were back at the cathedral, and it was a mostly Spanish-speaking area of town, so we didn't understand what they were saying half the time, but it was still good to be there, obviously, kind of like a traditional Latin Mass almost. Dare I say that, but to me it was, because I had no idea what was going on. And that was a good experience. Went over to Camp Pendleton for some training with the Marines for a couple months. Because as a medic, you have to do crossover training with the Marines if you want to be attached to them. During that time, I remember correctly, that's actually about when Ash Wednesday hit. I remember the priest coming out and saying that there were Catholics in the group. You know, we could all gather together and go through the tradition of Ash Wednesday, and so we did. A few of us Catholics in the group. So once again, I got to kind of perform my duties as a Catholic there. But outside of some very niche times, not necessarily. I got to my first command over in Spain. Beautiful, beautiful cathedrals everywhere you can imagine. And they have processions for every holiday that there is, which can scare some Americans because they wear this costume, I'm going to call it, that almost looks like what we would call a KKK costume here in the United States. It has the nice pointy hat on top, and some cities, depending on what city they're in, is all white. So it really looks identical with the little eyes cut out. But that's actually just a traditional wardrobe for them when they're doing processions, so they're not giving away their identity. Because a lot of times they'd actually do like self slashing on the back or whatever it might be.
Flagellation?
Yes.
Self-flagellation sounds like something else. I don't know if there's a word for it. But yeah, the beating yourself. I've seen the Da Vinci Code.
Yeah, there we go. There we go, Da Vinci. That's perfect. And so yeah, some cities we're all white, and so I know as Americans who show up, they do brief you at some point, like, hey, by the way, this season within the Catholic Church, and there's always a non-believer or Protestant explaining this, so they don't know exactly what's going on. Which for me, I didn't know either. Even though I'm Catholic, I still had no idea about the old world traditions. Like, hey, just so you know, it's not what you think it is. It's not like America. This is a religious thing for them. So if you go out at night between like 6 and 8, you might see this happen or whatever the time frame is. I remember the first time going out there, I watched them. The procession is a lot of guys dressed, like I said, looking like the KKK. But then you also have these just absolutely beautiful floats, and they're being carried by the same men, and they'll have Christ portrayed on it, or have Mother Mary, or the saints, or some of them might just be a large cross, or whatever it might be, depending on that portion of their procession, and also based on the city. So going and watching these was very inspiring for me to go, oh, this is what it means to be a Catholic, and not just modern day, early 2000s in Soldotna, Alaska, where I grew up, but it is a worldwide religion. It has a deep, deep roots in history. The people of Sevilla, and especially where I was in like Puerto Rico, I was going to say Puerto Rico, in Puerto Prince and Rota.
I was going to ask Rhoda.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was, the station Naval Base Rota there. But that region, that trifecta of towns, I mean, they go back to the origin of the Catholic Church. I mean, they had some of the original apostles even traveled out to Spain during that time when it was still under Rome. So the deep roots of the Catholic faith, even with the history of them being conquered by the Muslims and reconquering it. So the experience that in the beautiful cathedrals helped keep me inspired, but at the same time, not having English services, I was kind of turned away from going, I would say.
Yeah.
Once again, contracted to some Catholics that are hardcore traditional Latin Mass guys, and I understand that. But for myself, especially being so young in the faith, I didn't have a lot of support network at the time. Trying to go by myself to a foreign speaking, Spanish, not that foreign, but a foreign speaking, Mass was not exactly my top thing. And so for a couple of years, I was hit or miss. I might go once every few months, to be quite honest. Try to do a confession if I found a priest that spoke English, but that was about it for those years there. Going to California, about the same. And I can't even use the excuse of being in a foreign land because I was back home in America. But middle of Camp Pendleton, it was a half-hour drive to get off base, and none of my buddies were Christian. In fact, my roommate, ironically enough, on his inner bicep had 666 tattooed right across his arm, and that's just, I mean, a lovely guy to be around. To be honest, he was a hard worker and a good brother of mine. But I knew when we talked about faith, which we did, it was going to be very interesting conversations because his head was in obviously a very different mind space. And I was like, all right, well, when you feel comfortable with it, I would love to talk to you. By then, I had a giant cross tattooed on my chest. And so anytime we were running around shirtless doing whatever workouts we're doing or just getting ready for the night, because we have a bunch of guys sharing one small area, it was very clear I was a devout Christian, and they all knew it. So if they had questions, they came and asked me. It also helped that I was a Navy medic, being a corpsman. And so the Marines already kind of looked at me in a very positive light because I'm there to provide medical support and help them out. So if they didn't feel comfortable with chaps necessarily, because we had a chaplain attached to our unit, they would come to me or some of my other corpsman buddies because it was just very easy for them to look at us as somebody that could help, even if it is a spiritual matter, which I took great honor in. I mean, one fellow came up to me and inspired me to go back to church again. He was going through a predicament where he may have gotten a girl pregnant.
That'll happen.
Oh, especially with the Marine Corps, that's what they do. And he's like, Doc, I don't know what I should do here. I'm like, well, you were raised Catholic, right? And this was an assumption because he's Latino. He's like, yeah, of course. I'm like, is she? Yeah, of course. I think you know what you're supposed to do. And he's like, yeah, I think you're right. So they followed through with it within the next few months. They actually went out and got married and the whole 9 yards. Turns out she wasn't pregnant. But years later, I mean, this has been 3 years now. I'm still getting hit up by both of them, going, "Hey, thank you so much for inspiring us to go do the right thing," especially by their faith, because they were cultural Catholics, not necessarily hardcore believers. But yeah, it worked out quite well for them, and I'll take I'll take some credit for that for sure.
As you should. As you made a love connection.
Hopefully. I mean, they made their connection first before I got involved, but luckily it was there.
So, can we talk a little bit about reestablishing your faith?
Yes.
And kind of we don't have to go into all the circumstances of
Okay.
it, but we can kind of touch on it, kind of brush on it, and we'll just ask questions as we go along.
Okay.
So, how did you reestablish your faith? Why? What were some of the catalysts?
Right. Almost like a reconversion, to be quite honest. With the Marine Corps, I was on the back end of my contract, and we did a deployment to Australia, which I mean, we can't call it a deployment necessarily. It's as fun as it can be.
I did a TDY to Bulgaria. I get it.
Yeah, yeah. You're in a crazy part of the world, experiencing great things, and just having fun with your boys. So we were supposed to be there for 6 months, and quite early on, I was attached to an Australian medical unit, just as a almost like a liaison for the U.S. medical training team. Do Ideally, I was there to find out what they do, but they were also asking me questions what we do. I had some certificates like blood transfusions that they wanted to learn about, so I got to demonstrate that to them. At the same time, I was trying to figure out how their mobilized medical units operated at such great speed because they use a lot of trucks in their convoy specifically for medical that we don't necessarily do as Americans in the Marine Corps side of things. The Army has their own version, but the Marine Corps is very much just boots on the ground. Trucks are for other things. So we were doing this cross training, and during that couple months, I was out in the field, just me as my own self, and then a bunch of Aussies surrounding me. I happened to meet a girl, right? Because if there's a girl, you're bound to meet her in the military because there's not very many options. And yeah, we got to talking and had great connections. Loved the same music, obviously same interest being in the medical field. Um, Probably a mistake on my part, never brought up faith. Never made sure that that kind of spiritual journey was in line, which ended up biting me in the butt down the road. But nonetheless, I had the butterfly feeling in my stomach and I thought it was good to go. So we started dating once we got out of the field, and date after date after date. And she wanted to be serious, and I thought I wanted to be serious. We got in a good relationship. Carried that through for the next 4 or 5 months. We got towards the end of my time to be there, and it was okay. What's the game plan of how do we continue this? And mind you, she had invited me to go actually be her plus one to her brother's wedding, which was a great honor. I mean, obviously, very appreciative of that. And met the parents via like video time because we're in different towns of Australia than they are. Um, but we thought we were having a great relationship, and just kind of an awkward coincidence, found out that a guy had been messaging her pretty early on in the relationship. I think she had pretty much cut it off before it went too far. But I mean, down to the nature of him asking for inappropriate content from her, and it just sat so uneasy on me, especially knowing I'm about to leave. It's about to be this huge distance relationship that how long until I get to come back? If I can't really trust her while I'm here, how am I going to trust her when I'm gone? And so that came up in a pretty good argument for us. Um, and overall, I think we both just agreed that it wasn't a good idea for us to be in this kind of state at the end of our relationship before I leave. So we broke up, and no real hard feelings. Thought everything was okay. I go off. I do actually a 2 week trip down to Brisbane. Had a great time. Just kind of reorganizing myself. Went to mass a couple times. Went to confession. Yeah, I thought I was restarting the next journey to go back to America. And then returning back to Darwin, where we were deployed, like I said, this is about the last week of us supposed to be there. One of the last wave of my guys to leave because I was the main corpsman for my battalion surgeon there. And I get notified to go down to our military leadership's building where the officers are. And I head down and like, yeah, Sergeant Major wants to talk to you about something. Okay. I thought I had to do with my flight because it canceled my flight already a couple of times, and that was a whole ordeal. I get in there and he sits me down and he goes, "Well, Doc, I can't tell anything, but you're stuck here on legal hold." I go, "What do you mean I'm stuck here on legal hold?" And of course, now I'm thinking about what on earth could I possibly do in Australia that could get me stuck in legal hold? Like, I behaved myself when I was out in town. I watched my boys do some dumb stuff, but I never participated. And like sometimes I even help them get back on base. But man, what could I have possibly have done? And so I get turned over to the next unit, the oncoming unit, the holdover. And I'm just kind of waiting and waiting. A month passes by and no one seems to tell me anything or know anything. And then 2 months pass by, and finally the Australian police come and talk to me. And they're like, "Hey, if you didn't already know this, you're currently under investigation for some allegations against you." And they named my ex as the person who put them in. And I was like, I don't understand what is the ordeal. And the only thing they would tell me in that meeting that really awkward. the table filled up the entire room, so we kind of scrimmaged around the table trying to find your seat. There's just myself, one of my lead representatives from the Navy side. She was sitting next to me, and then the two police officers with their body cams on. And like, well, we can tell you who did the accusation, what the accusation is, and when the time frame that they're claiming. And so I took that information and I left. I was like, I don't understand. This is one, I was kind of blindsided because that's not at all what I expected to go into this meeting. I thought maybe he had to do something, a bar fight or something random that Marines get into. I was like, what on earth are they talking about? And I go through, and the first thing that my H1 told me to do was go find out what you're doing that day and that time that the claim has been made. So I go through my text messages and everything. I'm like, well, I was at the hospital picking up a patient. So maybe they're telling me the wrong day and time, like, because it doesn't line up with the story at all of what she was claiming. She made a full claim. It was, the morning after we had gone out, that when we had sex, she was claiming it was, she didn't want it. I was like, that's to me, that was a crazy claim because one, nothing had ever given me a red flag. She'd obviously never said anything of that nature. It was never, we had a very consensual relationship while we were together. After we broke up, we didn't talk to each other afterwards. So it's not like we went back and had makeup sex afterwards or anything of that nature that could be misleading. It was very clear. We were in good terms anytime we were together. And then we weren't together. It was, I thought, very black and white. And I'm looking at the timeline, I'm like, this can't be right. Maybe they give me the wrong day, maybe they give me the wrong time, whatever it might be. And the next meeting I had with him was finally a month later. Well, in this process, even before I was notified of what the charge was, I was trying to go to church as much as I could just because that was my only option off base, to be quite honest. During that legal hold, I was stuck on base, and I said, well, we can't hold you from going to service once a week for your faith. That kind of goes against a little bit of our First Amendment as Americans, even though the military doesn't super do well about abiding those. So I would go off to mass every Sunday. Like I said, that 1 month mark when I got notified, I was like, okay, now I really have some questions about life in general. I just don't understand what is going on. I need some better guidance here. So that definitely helped me feel the need to be at church and feel the need to be in a community that I could trust and talk to about the real deeper meaning of everything going on in this world. Well, time passes on and nothing changes, and the cops reinforce, this is the right day and time. Like, whatever evidence you have, you can present at court, because they don't have a way to drop the case in that situation. The only way the Australian government does, especially in the Northern Territory of Darwin, is that she would have to cancel the claim, which would mean she have to admit that she lied, which would then get her a charge on the Australian Army side. So it was very much hands are tied. I'm not going to do it because I get in trouble if I do.
Yeah.
So we proceed 13 months later after I get notified of being on legal hold. So it's instead of early October, now it's late October of the following year. And I finally go to trial. And day one is, talk about a crazy experience of going through an actual legit trial.
Yeah.
Never in my life would I experience that. Never in my life would I think, oh, I'm going to be involved in this somehow. Maybe I've got, called up to be on the jury, but no one ever expects to be on that side.
Yeah.
And day one was they just picked the jurors and explain the basic procedures of how the court system works. Day two is me testifying and my character witnesses, which luckily I had some really great people from the Navy that stood up for me, especially on the day in question. Like, no, we know exactly where he was without question. And then day three was her chance to be examined, and during which she confessed that no, she first tried saying that, oh, I told him the wrong day. And then the police officer was like, well, you told us this. We have the video recording. Are you really sure that you essentially lied to us about the day? She goes, no, I didn't lie about the day. Maybe things are just different than I explained them. And it just turned into like this really gray zone. And luckily my lawyer ate it up because he was able to just spill everything right there and then. But of course, for me, I'm going, it's been 13 months and this is what it came to. You could have said this day one, and this could have my entire life could have been not stuck here on legal hold this entire time. On the bright side, and there is always a bright side of things that happen, is it did help me rebuild my faith. I had a very good community at that church. Was part of the choir there. Learned a little bit of altar serving, not a huge amount because they had their own very good team, but being part of the faith, and it helped me read the Bible cover to cover twice while I was there. Dig into the catechism and understand the actual teachings of the church and understand the philosophy behind things. Made my prayer life a lot stronger because then it became, well, instead of, I might pray once every blue moon. Now it was, I'm praying when I wake up, thanking God that life is still going forward, praying to God every night, thankful that I've achieved another day and we're getting a day closer to where I need to be. Praying for all my meals, and just even when it came to a random thought, as well as not only did that strengthen me as in my faith, but then I could use that as well for a couple of my brothers that are going through similar predicaments that I was out there. In total, there's four of us on legal hold. Two were, I would say, cultural Catholics. They were raised that way, being a Latino background. And another one was Protestant. And the four of us got together and we're like, we're going through hell right now, but we got to stick together, and we can't turn our back to God. We can't change our life just because the world is being the way it is. And so I think the four of us all got strengthened through that journey, through the fire almost. And as uncomfortable it was, and obviously some very stressful, dark moments to look back at, over the 13 months, most of it was relatively okay. Like I said, I had my brothers there helping me out. I was helping them. Made some really good friends along the way that I still keep in touch with. Um, and when everything came to light finally and it was all exposed, it was like, well, the world didn't end. I'm still here. And what's my next step in the journey? To give thanks to God for to be there and loving me the entire time, and understanding that because there's bad things in the world doesn't mean it all has to be bad.
So, what were some of the most important lessons that you learned from that time, and then how have they translated to your life now?
Okay. One that I like to tell almost as a joke is, especially when COVID hit, everybody was talking about like the Me Too movement, and my philosophy was always, oh, that's only for rich people where a girl can get something out of it, like, or vice versa. A guy can get something out of the girl. Gold digger mentality that could never happen to a normal person. Like that's not a real person issue. That's just the 1% issue. Well, watching myself go through a relatively similar predicament of a false accusation, and then watching a couple other brothers go through some similar things that, once again, they also had a testimony that it wasn't true. Oh, so this does happen to regular people for reasons outside of just money. I thought money was the only reason. No, spite, anger, revenge. There's a number of reasons why someone might decide to go to the dark side and lie about you and lie about your character. Um, that was a huge wake up call, and not just in relationships, which definitely made me eerie about relationships going forward, for better or for worse. I say for better, but also just in life in general, realizing people can have a lot of motives that I might understand. The dark in this world comes in a lot of different shades, and just be a little bit more aware of what could be going on in the background, a little bit more not so naive of the world. Um, which to a lot of people might be a sad thing. Everybody wants to live that the nice childhood lifestyle. Everything's good, life is happy, whatever. But I think being aware of the world is just as positive, because you can use laws, logic, and wisdom to kind of navigate that and do better for yourself and do better for the people around you if you know what's going on. That's a huge, huge takeaway. And of course, the other one is building closer to the faith. I became a lot more well read, a lot more well versed, both in the Catholic Church, Christianity in general, and just other random topics, politics, culture, understanding people and like their mentalities. Went down a lot of psychology textbooks that was recommended to me, um, and just understanding a little bit better how the world spins and why it spins the way it does has been a huge takeaway.
Do you remember some of the books that you read?
Cool. Like I referenced earlier, the Catechism of the Catholic Church.
Okay.
That was definitely I didn't know that was a thing. Never heard of it before, until I went to a random priest when I got back home. Well, actually, right before I left Australia, went to one of the Australian priests I got really close with and said, hey, do you recommend anything for my flight? And that's what he recommended for me to read on the flight home. Um, some other like I got into Mark Twain for a while. That was really random, not related to anything I would say super in depth, but just a good read. Um, I have to get back to you on some bigger names. The philosophy, or not the philosophy, the psychology textbooks were quite literally just textbooks.
Okay.
And so that might be like the 11th edition of whatever
Yeah, yeah.
ordeal. Um,
Are you familiar with Carl Jung?
no, I'm not.
So Carl Jung was very much about shadow work, which is working on the parts of you that you don't like,
Okay.
the darkness, right? The bad part of all of us, and addressing those and dealing with them and then working past them. The other thing he's really big on is patterns. Check him out. Really, really
It was
like
Carleone.
Carl Jung.
Okay.
Carljung, Carl Jung.
Okay.
I know they have some of his books locally at Inkwell's. I got the red book,
Oh, perfect.
not to be confused with Chairman Mao's little red book.
Yeah.
But yeah, highly recommend it. Stop by Inkwell's. They've got all kinds of really, really, really cool stuff. But check out Carl Jung. He's got he has some really, really fantastic stuff.
Okay.
Now, if I know we kind of went over this earlier, but if folks want to reach out to you with regards to Knights of Columbus, with regards to faith, how would they do that?
I'm very easily findable on, I'd say, all the social medias, like Facebook, Instagram, whatever it might be. Um, Anthony Long. Right now, I think my profile photo has a big red beard from right when I got out of service. But
Actually, I think it's you with the medal.
oh, it might be with the state powerlifting medals. Yes.
Okay. So, real quick, since we are at Iron Asylum,
Yes.
that's how we know each other and how we connected initially. How has the journey of health and fitness and lifting, um, how is that reinforced by the situation, or um, how has that changed through your faith?
Okay. I can say I started off around middle school, high school area, getting into athletics, the basic high school stuff, wrestling, football, track. Even did some judo outside of school. Um, so I just was relatively athletic by the time I joined the military. That's why I was kind of confident I could do the military. Still hesitant, surprisingly enough, but confident I could at least go and try it. Um, Going through much more of just a runner for the first few years, especially on the Navy side. Didn't get to the gym and weight lift at all. Um, Not until I got over to the Marine Corps side, I was with snipers, and being that platoon, I think it made me hate running, honestly, because we ran so much of Ruxon, or we were in full ghillie suits running. I no longer wanted to spend my Saturday going or doing a half marathon. I was like, I think I've ran enough, so let's go do something else at the gym. And that's kind of where I fell in love with it again from years of not doing it. So weightlifting in California is so and so. I had a pretty good coach there for a little bit out in town, and then got to Australia and just kind of stayed with it. The food was amazing. To be quite honest, I think their bases feed their guys a lot better than ours do. Probably should put on record.
You've never been on an Air Force base, have you?
No, I have not. No
Okay.
pleasure.
Oh, sorry to hear that, man.
Yeah.
Get steak and lobster every night.
See, for us, that was a punishment. That meant you're going deployed longer, so that's not exactly the best thing in the world. But no, that's kind of yeah, I can imagine. I know the Army definitely had the worst food I ever experienced. But
So, counter argument to that.
Yeah.
While I was deployed to Kuwait, the very, very best chow hall I've ever been at was Camp Arif, John. And on Balad Air Base on the Army site, Anaconda, best chow hall ever. Generally, I think on deployments, the Army has the best chow halls because they're there for the longest. They get
Oh,
really
that's
good
true.
at working with baked beans.
Okay. Okay. I can understand that. Yeah, on the U.S. side of things, I didn't have too good experience with Fort Sam Houston Army Base, or there's another one down in Jacksonville I experienced for a little bit. But in general, Navy food all right, Marine Corps a little better, but all around Australian Army food, the best I ever experienced. I was amazed. Just yeah, it just had good food and a lot of it. That was also the huge bonus versus a small ration portion back in California. You get whatever you wanted at the buffet table in Australia. So that helped me gain some weight for sure because I showed up to Australia, it was probably 175, and I got to 190 relatively quickly. And then throughout the next, like I said, 13 years of just kind of on holdover. I got up to 205 finally, staying very persistent in the gym. That was a huge stress reliever for me. Like I said, going to church on Sunday and in the gym, that's all I really had. Being stuck on base outside of work. Um, so lifting the heaviest weight I possibly could, broke up a bunch of PRs. That's where I pulled a 705 deadlift conventional, nothing but a belt. Bench 315 for the first time ever there, and got used to benching 315 there. Squatting 500 for reps. I enjoyed. That was my pleasure time for sure. Just get everything off my mind. It's almost, dare I say, almost like a prayer when you're there in your own mind. It's just you and talking to God, like, hey, help me get through this. I'm sweaty, I'm tired, I'm exhausted. I got a big challenge ahead of me to move whatever weight this is or do whatever workout I'm trying to do. I need some help here. And you just kind of build a connection with really loud, bad music going on in the background. It's just kind of powerful. It may be a little too much caffeine, but I love the experience. And then I carried it over when I came back home. Obviously, going to the state competition for powerlifting, won that, set a couple state records. Honestly, I didn't get any stronger since I've been here. My spot got a little better, but everything else has been pretty much the same of where I was in Australia because I did put so much work in there. And now I have more outlets as well. I don't have to just use the gym to release my stress, which is very nice. On the downside, I do miss having that constant progress that I was making over there. I mean, when they say the forge sharpens the steel, it's very, very true what you can do with the body in that type of situation, just to beat yourself up physically and grow from it, the same as your spirit's being beat up and grow from that as well.
It's weird how those two, it's not weird, those two I think go together, like peanut butter and jelly. So for myself, when I went through what I went through, it was Iron Asylum. It was here at the gym. It was at Redemption MMA. It was not being in the house in my own head. I think that was probably the worst thing for me. And when I find myself even still like getting to that place where I'm like, I just want to shut myself into the house. I come here, I go someplace else, you know, figure it out. Right? But I think that having those outlets and something that you can measure your growth.
Oh, definitely.
Is very, very important. And I also think for me, for the lifting or the cardio or for the jujitsu, you say prayer, I say meditation, same. It allows you to talk yourself through, and you can get through this because going through something so much harder, like you said at the beginning, nobody struts when they're down on their knees. You got to get yourself back up. And so, Anthony, thank you for getting yourself back up, and thank you for your time and going through that with me. I appreciate that.
Oh, my pleasure. And thank you. You've been such an inspiration for me here at the gym and at church and everywhere else we go. And I love being able to see another veteran do quite well on this side of the world. So, watch a lot of our brothers and sisters get out and try and navigate life because it's such a different phenomenon to be in the civilian world. Even though, even if you don't see combat, it's still a huge change in pace and change in lifestyle, not being in uniform every day, not be doing the same routine every single day, and be told what to do every day. And here in this free world going, well, I have some resources. What do I do with my hands? What do I do with myself? And I see you just absolutely prospering and growing here. I love it. So I'm chasing after that myself.
I love you. Thank you so much for your time, Anthony. You want to close this with a prayer?
Most definitely.
All right.
Go ahead. The most traditional. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Bless us, O Lord, these thy gifts for which we have received from thy bounty through Christ our Lord. Amen. The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Which of course is the most traditional blessing for a meal. Because to me, this is the feed for the soul. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much.